Hi everyone, and welcome back to GeoCurrent. For the past few years, the story around advanced chips has been pretty simple. Washington shuts the door, and Beijing scrambles for alternatives. That era has quietly ended. This week, the US moved from denying access to using access as leverage, and the shift is much bigger than it looks. In a decision that surprised almost everyone in the industry, US officials will now permit Nvidia's H200 processors to be sold to China, but only under a new rule: a 25% fee on every unit, paid straight into the US Treasury. This isn't about trade anymore. It's basically a premium-priced access system, and it forces Beijing into a weird choice: pay more to stay in the game or pause its own AI momentum. The H200 pivot. Let's start with the pivot that dropped this week because it flipped the entire playbook. Until last week, the most advanced processor Nvidia could ship into China was the H200. A heavily reduced model created purely to satisfy export rules. It worked on paper, but in practice, Chinese companies hated it, and eventually the guidance from regulators leaned towards stepping away from it entirely. Now Washington has opened the door to the H200. This is a completely different tier of hardware, Nvidia's second most powerful AI accelerator, just one step below the newest Blackwell line. Analysts say the H200 delivers around 6 times the performance of the H200. In practical terms, this is the first time in years that Chinese companies have been offered something close to what global competitors use. Chinese biggest platforms, ByteDance, Alibaba, and Tencent have been asking for access to a real, modern training chip. Now they can get one. But there's a twist. A 25% fee sits on top of every sale. Not a normal tariff, more like a premium for using American technology. In effect, Washington is saying, you can build your AI future with our silicon, but part of that bill goes straight into our treasury. Beijing's dilemma. Only a short time ago, the message from Beijing to its own tech giants was firm: reduce reliance on US chips and shift to domestic suppliers. Companies were pushed towards Huawei's processors and expected to treat them as long-term replacements. The logic was straightforward. If the US won't sell top-tier chips, China must build its own. Now that equation is scrambled. The obstacles that pushed companies towards domestic options have suddenly disappeared. If you're running the cloud division at Alibaba or Tencent, you're looking at two choices. You can buy a domestic chip that still faces yield issues and software limitations, or you can buy the Nvidia part, pay the fee, and get predictable performance and mature development tools. For business leaders, the answer is obvious. For political leaders, the answer is much less comfortable. If Beijing approves H200 imports, it weakens its self-sufficiency campaign. If it blocks them, it slows down its own firms at a time when AI performance gaps are widening globally. There's no clean option. The quality versus quantity gap. We need to understand why the H200 matters so much. It exposes the reality of the quantity over quality approach China has been forced to adopt. China's leading alternative, the Huawei Ascend 910C, is a capable piece of hardware, but in raw single-chip performance, it lags significantly behind Nvidia's top tier. To compensate, Chinese engineers have been building massive supernodes. They chain together thousands of mid-range chips to reach the performance levels others get from far fewer units. It's like trying to win a Formula One race by tying 4 sedans together. It might generate the same horsepower, but the engineering complexity is a nightmare. The H200 solves this efficiency problem. It allows for denser, faster, and more energy-efficient clusters. If Beijing allows these chips in, the quantity over quality strategy collapses. Why build a complex supernode of 10,000 Huawei chips when 2,000 Nvidia chips can do the same job with less power and proven software? What Washington gains? So why is the US doing this? Why give a strategic rival a weapon this powerful? It's a strategy of controlled dependency. Washington knows that total denial was accelerating China's independence. By totally cutting off access, the US was inadvertently acting as the best marketing department Huawei ever had. By permitting the H200, but not Nvidia's next generation, the US keeps Chinese firms tied to Nvidia's software ecosystem, tools, and standards. The US maintains a full generation of technological headroom, and the 25% fee turns every Chinese purchase into revenue that offsets the very competition policymakers worry about. Simultaneously, the US keeps the absolute best technology, the Blackwell and Rubin series chips, strictly at home. This maintains a one-generation gap. China gets yesterday's Ferrari, the US drives today's spaceship. In other words, China gets access, but not leadership. The US gets influence, and it gets paid for it. The geopolitical ramifications. The real danger for the US was never just about China having chips. It was about China building a parallel stack. If China is forced to build everything from scratch, chips, servers, clouds, and models, they will eventually export that entire package to the global south. A Huawei cloud running Huawei chips with Baidu models becomes a viable alternative for countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. That ecosystem breaks US leverage. By selling the H200, the US disrupts that timeline. It makes it economically irrational for Chinese companies to invest billions in a domestic alternative when the American option is available, even at a premium. It slows down the creation of that parallel world. Conclusion. We're witnessing a fascinating pivot from ideology to pragmatism. The previous administration played checkers, block the chip, stop the progress. The current strategy is closer to 3D chess. Sell the chip, tax the rival, maintain the software lock-in, and keep the best toys for yourself. The ball is now firmly in Xi Jinping's court. Does he take the practical route and allow the H200 to power China's AI revolution, effectively funding the US government? Or does he slam the door, forcing his own tech giants into a technological dark age in the name of self-sufficiency? The H200 is no longer just a processor, it is a political wedge. I want to hear your take on this new 25% fee. Is this a brilliant way to extract value from a rival? Or is it a dangerous mistake that gives China the technology it needs to modernize its military? Let me know in the comments below. This is GeoCurrent. We'll be watching.